What I'm about to tell you could happen to anybody.
So he told me.
I'm sure it could. In any case, I know I was there. Look, on a day, I can't remember when exactly, I found myself, and I mean found myself, on this endless escalator going to no particular place. And there, just above me, I swear, was Lenin and Rupert Murdoch. I can see them now, that they were in the middle of a passionate discussion. I swear to you. Cappuccino, please. Anything, sir? No, thanks.
This tale of this encounter between my Uncle Michael, Murdoch and Lenin, which at the time of hearing, I thought made him just about fit to be released into the community, started with Michael Deakin, my uncle, boarding his usual 6:45 train to Three Bridges one winter evening. It was 12 minutes past 7 when Michael Deakin turned to page 2 of his evening paper. He had just managed to catch a glimpse of the headline, Murdoch gets, or was it acquires, doesn't get, buys, grabs, when the train to Three Bridges came to a sudden halt in total darkness.
Excuse me, do you have a light, please? Do you have a light, please? Do you have a light?
My uncle felt utterly frustrated that he could not find out what Murdoch had indeed got, bought or grabbed. So anxious was he that another of his favourite sports, newspapers or channels could have been wrenched away by the great Murdoch empire. The story so far seemed logical enough. Michael Deakin, my uncle, hated Murdoch. He blamed him for all that his dear England had become. A hard, sniggering, resentful, hard shoulder of a place. More than anything, I suppose, he hated Murdoch for having so rudely snatched his football from his television, as he now never knew when he could watch his beloved Southampton. My uncle only managed to hold on to his fragile world by doing his very best to repeat every day as if it was yesterday. He deeply resented any change that he felt was needless and ultimately useless.
So, I began to wonder what on earth had brought us all together in this carriage. What could be the common thread? Now that everything in this country was so chaotic, in spite of rumours of a new direction from a new government, you just had to read into almost anything and everything, a hidden hand, a plan.
As for a plan, I really couldn't see how my uncle being stuck in this train could possibly end up in his meeting Lenin and Murdoch. But what I did know was that my uncle worked as an architect for a local London council. Married, 2 children, twins, a Ken Livingstone admirer by night, a Blair supporter by day. Dreamt of having his own practice, but did not dare to do so due to family commitments and his great fear of taking risks. And so he escaped from his everyday worries by investing all his spare money into buying spare parts for his telescope, and then spending all his free time observing the moon and the stars. When my uncle couldn't fathom why fate in the shape of British Rail had stranded him in the middle of nowhere, he went back to trying to guess what Murdoch had managed to get. The more he thought of Murdoch, the more he became enraged. Remembering as he did his horrible twins screaming their hearts out for TV dishes. How quickly when panicked, he thought, one reaches for one's private State of England speech.
Shut the door!
My uncle went on to think about that man and his endless powers, and why those powers always seemed to be waltzing behind his back.
Was he a product of nature? Still at this late stage, working itself out, an evolutionary process just opening its eyes? An unknown plant that suddenly appears in the desert? Why couldn't it have been any other way? Why did it always have to be like this?
And so it was, on his 6:45 train to Three Bridges, that my uncle, for once in his life, allowed himself to dream. In this dream, by his own admission, he cast himself as the one man who would succeed in getting up Murdoch's nose. The first and the last man to give Murdoch a pain in the neck. Yes, he would infiltrate his body and sail directly towards the big man's throat. And yes, he would throttle it.
As I settled down to start my glorious pain-giving voyage, episode 1, she arrived.
I am finally here. Thanks for allowing me in. And I'm sorry for being so late, in spite of being able to hear your dream of getting at the great prince's throat from miles off. It was thrilling. Still, I've made it just in time.
In time for what?
To save you.
Save me? Who are you?
Never mind that. First of all, Mr. Deakin, before you start sailing on your glorious voyage, may I just show you your ancestors? Can you not just see yourself? Do you not recognize yourself one tiny little bit? One of that ever so long line of miserable idiots, all those sweated nights railing against all manners of tsars, police chiefs, newspaper proprietors, presidents, and pawnbrokers, writing their poisonous little leaflets, planning their kidnaps, bombings, and murders. But then, Mr. Deakin, when the sun rises, when they come face to face with their enemies, aren't they the first to be on their knees, praying for recognition and 2 little florins for their silver trinkets? And you, Mr. Deakin, of 43 Warrington Avenue, father of the most awful twins, moon spy and repeater of every day, you of all people think that you can destroy the great prince?
The possessor of this seemingly uninvited voice, my uncle assured me, was built like a... She had many tongues that spoke like, and yet she was as light as...
Listen. I don't want one of his jobs, as you seem to be implying. I don't want his money or anything else. I just want his works destroyed. That's all.
And benefit from the reflected glory? Be clear. If you came face to face with him, what would you do?
If you'd let me get on with my journey, I promise you'll be the first to find out.
What a plan. If you don't know now, you never will. And in any case, you're far too old, too meek. For God's sake, you can't even raise your voice at your twins.
I do sometimes. Anyway, that doesn't invalidate the need. Let's just try to be serious for a moment. His works are monstrous. Poisonous. Everyone knows that. So why are you trying to stop me? You still haven't told me who you are.
I'm here to reason with you and douse those poisonous ulcers. The great prince feeds on dreams like yours. Actually, in some ways, you're quite alike. But you're sweeter.
At this very point, when my uncle was still determined to undertake his vengeful journey, the presence, as he called her, settled by his right ear.
Remember Milton's description of Satan in Paradise Lost? It says here on your sheet that you actually like this poet. Come and see what he has to say about being driven by revenge. But what will not ambition and revenge descend to? Who aspires must down as low as high he soared, obnoxious first or last. Revenge at first thought sweet, bitter ere long back on itself recoils.
It's not revenge I seek, it's justice. And a little bit of retribution wouldn't go amiss either.
For God's sake, if not for my own, Mr. Deakin, I'm going to take you places, and I swear, Mr. Deakin, by the end, you'll be back to your normal self. Retribution, compensation. You want to get up this Everest of a man's nose. You and a million others want to create a better world. See this, the great prince at his best, claiming his role as a champion of freedom in front of an elite of image builders, controllers, and administrators.
The sort of regime which has controlled British television during its first 60 years also governed the printed word for many decades after the invention of printing presses. The established church, like today's established broadcasters, feared that print would end its near monopoly of what people read. The government of the day, like many governments of today, feared that it would lose control of what was published. So for some time, printing presses were subject to all manner of regulations and censorship. So in 1694, the English Parliament abolished pre-publication censorship of the printing presses, leaving the printing word solely to the general laws of the land, an event described by that great Whig historian Macaulay as greater in its contribution to English liberty, neither the Magna Carta or the Bill of Rights. I believe that British television has now begun its own 1694.
And after his speech, there was the silence. Hardly any argument, no confrontation, just bonehead silence. And all your cousins, nephews, granduncles could do was to sigh, a big, inward, plaintive sigh. Like you, Mr. Deakin, they knew the game was up, over, lost. And when I listen to that audience's silence, I'm minded to think of poor little Adam when he is expelled from paradise. God knows I've been round long enough. How shall I part? How shall I part? And whither wander down into a lower world? To this obscure and wild? How shall we breathe in other air, less pure, accustomed to immortal fruits?
How shall we breathe in other air less pure, accustomed to immortal fruits? Well, what would you have said if you'd just been expelled from paradise? Whoopee, it's a commercial break.
So why their silence? Can you just hear that silence, Mr. Deakin? This is the silence of Democrats, all of them having seen so many of these monuments, all with their inscriptions, "They died for freedom." Freedom in this world is made to be silent. It is not imprisoned by loud definitions, and the Dark Prince could bathe in that silence. For he knew that if you wanted to stop him, you would have to put a value, a name, and then a stop to that freedom, and that you couldn't do in the same way that you hate the very idea of censorship. You knew perfectly well that for democracy to be a democracy, it had to accommodate the idea of Satan. And look at you. Poor you. Look what you have made of your freedom. Curled up into something so small, thinking of something that's so big.
And then I thought about the silence. Theirs, mine. And I remembered a certain leader's speech claiming a new moral vision. And in my head, I mixed the images of his visit to Murdoch with that silence.
And then he recalled those ever-present images of freedom.
And then I thought of my house, and the moon, and freedom, and that silence.
Where and when do you think their voices were stilled? Where was their silence really made? A strange kind of word, silence, because it is the opposite of what it means. But that is exactly the kind of world we're about to go into. And hopefully, you will see the engine room of that silence and why your dream of getting up Murdoch's nose is so utterly hopeless.
This tour is sponsored by the Murdoch Foundation. Machete maniac kills wife.
Be very careful, Mr. Deakin. You're privileged. You're in his private museum.
2 teenage prostitutes, 10 drunken laughing louts, drop dog over a bridge.
The case, brought by the princess over pictures taken with a hidden camera as she exercised in a fitness center, had been due to start on Monday.
England coach Glenn Hoddle says he's aware of the wife-beating allegations.
He comes here whenever he has an attack of liberal values and feels he may just have been a little responsible for corrupting our poor world. Here he finds solace. He feels confirmed that he's just documenting the world and not an actor in it. Welcome to the Prince Murdoch's world of the fall. Slowly. What do you see?
A monument to a sewer.
So that the likes of you can drink clean water.
You said it.
Jaffa of our business staff was in court to hear the verdicts.
So the higher the price, the more attractive this appeared to be to shareholders. The trial itself has lasted 112 days.
Please observe the great man's understanding of life. Its fragility, its pathos, its unpreparedness. Yes?
There is a white flag flying over Sandy.
It's a world with a heads you win and heads you lose on its masthead. Anyone who tells you otherwise is a social engineer with an empty toolbox. In other words, it's a lottery. This is a world where the doors of fortune only open one way, outwards, so that one cannot force them by charging at them. So there is nothing, absolutely nothing one can do. And you want to get up the great prince's nose. You make me laugh, poor little dreamer. At least let me console you. There is some order in this lottery. Let me quench your thirst for old orders. Here is the brickwork for order. You laugh? Don't. See what the great Republican, the great Puritan makes of women. Sex is function. Sex as function. Doing it. Sex as work. God forbid if there was joy. If that were to happen, there would be joy of the senses and no work could be done. This, Murdoch's romprum, is the reward for a hard day's work and unfair pay. Happiness is repetition. We want more of what makes us happy. And at the same time, repetition is what erodes it, and so you start all over again. The workaholic's vision of sex. That, in short, is the order. Don't look so shocked, Mr. Deakin. It's so simple. On the one hand, he revels in chaos, and so makes everyone vulnerable. And on the other, he dulls desire, and so reminds us of the limits beyond which we cannot go. And all you and your friends could do was to sit and watch this great ascent. Farewell, happy fields, where joy forever dwells. Hail, horrors, hail, infernal world, and thou, profoundest hell, receive thy new possessor, one who brings a mind not changed by place or time. This mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. And you, Mr. Deakin, moon spy and repeater of every day, you of all people think that you can destroy the great prince.
It's a democracy. Of course I can. I too can destroy. Anyway, I'm only thinking about it. What's the problem with that?
Precisely. Thinking is why we are still here.
Look, I have as much right as anyone else to get rid of him.
Right. The little man's tantrum. You want to put the world to right. Change it. Be a big man and marry a great quarrel. Do me a favor and try to remember this. He seemed, or fixed in cogitation deep, as now in hope to find who might direct his wandering flight to paradise, the happy seat of man, his journey's end and our beginning woe. But first he casts to change his proper shape, which else might work him danger or delay, and now, a stripling cherub he appears, not of the prime, yet such as in his face youth smiled celestial, and to every limb suitable grace diffused so well he feigned.
I think the important thing is that there'll be plenty of newspapers with plenty of different people controlling them, so that there's a variety of viewpoint, that there's a choice for the public. This is the freedom of the press that is needed. Freedom of the press mustn't be one-sided just for a publisher to speak as he pleases.
try and bully the community. There must be an alternative.
His malice, and with rapine sweet, bereaved his fierceness of the fierce intent it brought that space. The evil one abstracted stood from his own evil, and for the time remained stupidly good. But the hot hell that always in him burns, though in mid-heaven, soon ended his delight, and tortures him now more, the more he sees of pleasure not for him ordained. Then soon fierce hate he recollects. Thus the orb he roamed with narrow search, and with inspection deep considered every creature, which of all most opportune might serve his wiles, and found the serpent, subtlest beast of the field, fit vessel, fittest imp of fraud in whom to enter, and his dark suggestions hide.
Exactly my thoughts, Mr. Deakin.
I mean, when you sleep with the next King of England, I think you go into a rather different stratosphere. You know, having an affair with Prince Charles behind the husband's back is not necessarily the best way of leading a low-profile life.
Fit vessel, fittest imp of fraud. What do you expect? The prince chose to reign in hell, and I am sorry, but one doesn't rule in hell with a group of choristers. But then, Mr. Deakin, look at how the foot soldiers of your own side made your evergreen utopias collapse. In August 1969, the Sun came up for sale, and the owners offered it to the unions.
Well, I think the union always prefers to see the labour movement having its press. But we're concerned with the practical situation of the commercial viability of a newspaper. And everything seems to indicate that a commercial newspaper, national newspaper, does not get along commercially easily if it's tied.
This man opposed an attempt to turn the Sun into an independent, non-profit-making, pro-labour daily. He supported Murdoch because he guessed quite correctly that there would be more money, more jobs, all the rest was fancy. And then, nearly 30 years later, we got this.
Stogat 82 voted to disrupt distribution of News International titles.
And so they went about their way creating words. Oh, and what words! And whilst you and your like were writing dreams of murders and revenge, whilst you raved and ranted about the end of civilization, Murdoch's angels were duly installed as the new rulers. And look how easily they made your kingdom subside.
I read the Mail, I read the Sun, I read the Telegraph, I read the Mirror, you know, and then, you know, if I'm left with the Guardian and the Independent at the bottom of the pile, then I'm not that bothered.
Who are these alpha attackers? The fault police of the middle-class left who decide what constitutes art, entertainment, comedy and culture. Behold, the opposition, identified.
The British working classes, they are always patriotic, they always applaud Britishness, and they think that Britain is still a great country. The middle classes just hold their nose when the word Britain is introduced, and England still more.
And you, like the others, were confused. Thus, this silence. Because these people had believed that they were part of heaven, if not actually in the process of building it, until Murdoch's angels made them realize that the heaven they were part of was nothing more than an enclave, a timeshare for the privileged, and they felt guilty. Silenced by the sudden realization that they could no longer represent anyone but themselves.
In America, where people have a choice over what they want to watch,
and the good Black Prince, himself started creating his new empire.
Skyscrapers. 1,000 channels. We are the one.
There was a time when all the world spoke different languages and even used different words. As the Lord Murdoch journeyed to the north, he came unto the city of London. He said, "Come, let us make bricks, mortar, and plastic, and let us build a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and make a name of ourselves." Then the Lord God came down. "Here," he said, somewhat shocked, "here are one people with one language." And now that he has started doing this, from now on, nothing he has in mind to do will be beyond his reach. And the language that was created was Babel. And it was American.
Radio choices, sports, soaps, movies.
Upon the firm, opacious globe of this round world, whose first convex divides the luminous orbs, enclosed from chaos and the inroad of darkness old, Satan alighted walks.
Could it really be the devil that has given you 5,000 channels? Soap, sport, sci-fi, music, games, arts, education, videos on demand, data services? Is it the devil that has made it possible for you to create your own angles, programs, stories? Is it the devil that makes you no longer at the mercy of controllers and dictators? In short, Michael Deakin, free will on this earth has been restored, and according to you, it is the devil that has done it. The image you have of the future, Mr. Deakin, is only what you see in the present, and that image sucks up all differences, all possibilities. You really are a depressing case.
You are the devil's voice. The world that I live in is broken apart, fragmented, senseless. The air is so thick with images that the feeling of reality is getting thinner. Light is darker. Freedom to do what?
But Mr. Deakin, you do make sense of it. Come and see for yourself. You build your own monsters, Mr. Deakin. That is how you make sense of what has happened. Just in the same way you make sense of your own fragmented world by calling it fragmented, or how you stabilize your sense of dislocation by thinking it was really all a dream. You justify your real impotence by creating him as a monster. You need your monsters, Mr. Deakin. You need the illusion that they appear uninvited out of the sea from nowhere. You love your monsters. It makes you feel that you are not in control and that the real is finally nothing but what is. I'll whisper this to you. It's the great prince's victory.
That was when I found myself on this staircase. And there was Murdoch, and he was telling Lenin how much he admired him, how at Oxford he'd had his bust on the mantelpiece, and how he celebrated every anniversary of his death. And then Lenin said how much in awe he was of Murdoch and all that he'd done, even if he did disagree with his objectives. And that, yes, if he had his time again, he would have made Pravda more fun. There would have been more games. And that, yes, why not, even if it went against his every principle, he would have had page 3 land girls. And then, blow me down, if they didn't shake hands and agree to make a bid for the Heaven and Hell cable channel. I ran.
It was then, in the middle of this corridor, that my uncle remembered Milton's lines at the end of Paradise Lost.
So shall the world go on, to good malignant, to bad man benign, till the day appear of reparation to the just, and vengeance to the wicked. Why couldn't it have been any other way? Why did it always have to be like this?
Maybe changes were in the air.
43 Warrington Avenue, please.
Maybe, he thought, the monsters could be defeated.
Weren't you?
Dear, dear, dear Mr. Deakin, still fantasizing.